there are references throughout macroeconomics to the United States kind of spending and taxing history over time and the debt as a percent of GDP for the United States and for other countries. So I thought it would be useful to take a look at that. I've got that in these two charts here that I've put together from information that is publicly available here from the White House and the Office of Management and Budget. They put together these historical tables, and you can see there's a great variety of details that you can dig into. We're just going to be really looking at kind of the very top level data of spending, taxes, and deficit or surplus as a result. So we can see over time, this is in real dollars, so this is constant 2005 US dollars. We've adjusted for inflation, and we can see this is in billions as well over here. So this would be $1,000 billion or $1 trillion, $2 trillion, $3 trillion, $4 trillion. And we're looking at three different things here. The first is this blue line, which is tax receipts. And these tax receipts, we can see kind of over time increasing with some big variability. We'll talk about that here in just a second. We've also got the spending, and the spending is all the spending that the federal government has on wars, on infrastructure projects, on welfare payments. This is really kind of in two parts: discretionary and mandatory spending, if you were to dig into this a little bit further. And we can see that that's also expanding over time. The size of the federal government has increased over time, and we're really looking at just 1940 and on. Before 1940, before the Great Depression, the federal government was a relatively small part of kind of the American society and as output as a percent of GDP. Now it's somewhere in the range of 17 to 22% of the economy, depending on the year that you're looking at. So let's just kind of take a look through here and just put together some of the things that happened in history and what was actually going on as a result of the federal government. And if we start right here, we can see, and let me just change the color of this pen real quick. We can see right here that we see some big spending, and this is a result of obviously World War II. In this World War II spending, it was really debt financed, as most wars are. We can see some tax revenue increases, but mostly we were spending on things like tanks and defense, national defense, kind of across the nation and really across the world there. We were spending a lot of money in real terms, and we can see this is the first time where we have just really big deficits for a period of years. And then we return to what the federal government really had been doing for a long time, which is, relatively speaking, balanced budgets. Only pretty small kind of surpluses or deficits, a little bit larger here kind of as we're going out. And then we can see there's really kind of a big demarcation here. Right around the late 1980s, we start seeing some where these two lines really they disconnect. We see some increases in spending right in here, and we also see some decreases I should say, we see slower growth rate of tax receipts, and that's for a number of reasons here. So what are some of the things that are going on in the spending line? Well, throughout the 70s and 80s, we had the Cold War that was going on, so there was some kind of war spending as well. But we also were expanding civil rights to a lot of individuals, so there was some extra costs there as a result of doing that. And then we were also expanding the welfare program. We had the Great Society programs, and we had some kind of additional welfare programs and things that were happening in the 80s as well that were increasing spending by the federal government. Taxes, on the other hand, did not really increase or keep up with that, and this is where we start seeing persistent federal deficits year over year, where we are borrowing money from individuals and other nations to be able to finance the operations of the federal government. And what is it that's kind of causing this? Well, right here in 1986, kind of the mid-1980s, we had a tax, we had really a kind of tax reform that ended up kind of lowering the rates and broadening the base is the general terms that are used. But what did it in effect do on real terms? It really slowed the growth of tax receipts coming into the federal government, even while spending increased. And we see that really continued all the way until right about here, 1996. And we had a kind of a confluence of events that happened right at that time. We had a small government shutdown, and the Republicans were in Congress. We had a Democratic president, Bill Clinton, but both of them were basically arguing for the same thing. They were both looking to end this deficit spending and return to some sort of balanced budget. We actually ended up having a big spike in tax receipts, which we can see here in the blue line. And then we also see this red line, the spending, which kind of, I wouldn't say flatline, but the rate of growth really decreased. Some of this tax increase was just as a result of the economy growing relatively quickly during the late 1990s. This was really, there were two things going on. So one, we had the buildup of the dot-com bubble. So this was really the first gains that we saw economically from the efficiencies of the internet. But also we were seeing really big efficiencies from globalization during this time without really many of the costs. So we were liberalizing trade, we were opening new trade agreements with even kind of neighbors, such as NAFTA, where we were trading with Canada and Mexico more than we had previously as of 1994. And we're starting to see some of those types of trade agreements coming in here where we're really expanding markets without a lot of the costs. And then we have kind of a big demarcation right in here as well, where this surplus, period of surpluses end. It's right around 2001, and we know there's a big thing that happened right there in 2001 as well, which was the beginning of the global war on terrorism. We had the 9/11 attacks, which after that we had a war in Afghanistan and Iraq. We have the global war on terror, kind of drone attacks and different activities across a number of countries. That is all increased spending here, in addition to some social programs that were going on. What do we also see at the same time? At the exact same time that was going on, we see two tax cuts, a tax cut in 2001 and 2003. We also see some of this is the tax receipts are decreasing just from the small recession that we had after the dot-com bubble in 2000 and 2001. We see that tax receipts start to really pick up relatively quickly as the economy was really overheating as we get towards 2007, which is when we hit the kind of Great Recession as we think about it. And here we had a lot of individuals losing their jobs. The taxable base decreased, and so tax receipts decreased as well. And here, at the exact same time, we have automatic stabilizers that took into place, which is automatic spending to help stimulate the economy, to help stimulate demand. And what does that look like? Well, these are social programs like unemployment insurance, right, where you will get unemployment benefits if you lose your job for a period of time. Where we had extra welfare payments that were going. We have individuals who were really falling on hard times, and we saw a big increase in the food stamp program to help underwrite kind of nutrition for individuals who didn't have the funds to be able to pay for it themselves. So a lot of those programs are very good programs, and they make sense when we enter into a recession. What we just continue to see was a big increase in the spending as well, and this big kind of simultaneous decrease in the taxable base. This is really kind of Keynesian Economics 101, which we'll get into and talk about a little bit more. But what does it result in? It results in big kind of real term or real dollar deficits. In fact, year over year, over $1 trillion that we were adding to the debt. And what is the debt itself? Well, that's what we're looking at down here in this chart, and that is just it's the sum of all of the deficits and surpluses that have been run by the federal government over the years. And this chart down here, this is from economists Reinhardt and Rogoff. They have a time series for a number of countries that's really interesting to take a look at. They've also done a few things, you might have seen them in the news, where they've done some analysis that has been questioned by some other economists as far as the way that they do that. But their time series is relatively I think relatively well accepted, and so we'll just take a look at that here. What are we looking at? This is as a percent of the economy, so 100% right here would be a debt level that is the size of the economy. And we can see that this is going all the way back to 1790 that they kind of put this together. So we've got a few things. Obviously, this would be coming off of the American Revolution, and then we were running a big period of, like I said, the federal government was relatively small up until the Great Depression. Right here, kind of basically the 1930 to 1935, 1937 or so, right in this period. And right 1940 is where we pick this back up right about here. So a few things that we see, obviously there's another war right in here, which wars are typically debt financed. We also see the Civil War obviously right in here. We see World War I, where we have some increases in expenditures that result in deficit spending. And then we see some of the effects of the Great Depression here. And then this is what I was talking about before, which is we see this great increase in real dollar terms of deficit spending. And that's the first time where we really see World War II driving us towards a large debt as a percentage of the entire GDP, as a percent of the entire U.S. economy. And that really went away because, as I talked about up here, we really went back to kind of balanced budget or near balanced budget proposals. And over time, we were growing as an economy as well. So the economy is growing, output is growing, and we're not adding anything else relatively speaking, or we're not adding much relatively speaking to the debt. And so the debt level started to fall. And this is, we're starting to see like kind of a big fall in the debt. Really, this is growth led. And I'll actually put this here. This is as a result of economic growth here. And then what do we see? Well, some of this, basically all of this spending here that we started to see that was in excess of the tax revenues, that's what we see throughout here, which is the big buildup over time of all of this right in here. We then see this small little period right in here where we're eating away at the debt, which we see right here. And then we see all of this right in here, 2001 all the way through kind of for really, relatively speaking, as long as the eye can see, as we're currently running our economy, and that's what this big buildup is. And I just look at this, we bring this up, not necessarily, I mean, depending on if you come at this as a Democrat or a Republican, you might find data in here that kind of supports your point of view either way. What we do want to look at is say, well, one, we haven't been here very often as far as the size of the debt as a percent of our economy. That being said, we have been here before and we've been able to recover. In that period, we were able to recover because of growth. It wasn't necessarily because if we come up here, it's not necessarily because we constrained spending or that we really cut, kind of had large cuts in the size of government. It's mostly because we grew the economy larger than the kind of taxing and spending rates grew. What are we seeing down here? Will we find ourselves in a same type of period where we're going to have to get rid of this debt somehow? But there's only a few ways that you can do it, right? So you can, I guess, theoretically, you could default on the debt, which we will likely not do as a government. We could inflate away some of that debt, which who knows might be an option. Or we could grow ourselves out of this debt. There's a few other options that we could have where we could cut the size of government. We could cut the spending relative to the tax receipts that come in, and that would obviously pay off some of this as well. But there doesn't seem to be any political consensus that that increases in tax revenue or cuts in spending are going to happen from either Democrats or Republicans. So really what we're starting to look at is what are we going to do to alleviate this buildup of debt in the United States. Like I said, there's only a few options. We can grow our way out of it, we can inflate our way out of it, or we can really kind of look at making some sort of structural change to how much we tax and how much we spend so that we begin running surpluses. But at some point we are going to have to make one of those choices, or we're going to have to find some sort of way to grow the economy in kind of in the 4 to 6% range. As we've looked at as far as growth economics. So just a few things to think about as we're looking at the history of fiscal spending in the federal government.